All right. Welcome back to the Hangout or the Green Room where you're waiting to go on stage or whatever. All right. So I got my buddy Ozzy back here in the background on the TV, but he could not join me this week. I had other invited guests, but you know, whenever you try something new, you kind of got to get the ball rolling before people are able to join you. It has to kind of have a little steam. And right now, you're witnessing a part where I just don't have that kind of steam right now. So that said, I'm just going to go ahead and push on with the program because I think this hangout is going to be something that's important that stimulates people getting out of their rut, listening to new music, kind of finding music that they haven't listened to that's not necessarily new or something that's current, but music that they haven't listened to because it doesn't get a lot of airplay. And I think probably some of the best music right now does not get airplay. I mean, personally, I don't listen to the radio for music very much anymore. I'll listen to news and talk radio and stuff like that, but rarely do I have a station that I tune into or bounce between, two or three radio stations. The music that they play right now just doesn't really interest me very much. It seems that it lacks really musical ability. And I mean, I like some kind of what I consider kind of far out stuff. It doesn't have to have whole lot of melodic content or super production or uh, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, I don't feel like a person that's real disconnected with what's going on and just listening to the what I call the oldies or whatever. That's not how I feel about music. I feel like I can discover music on a daily basis, but it's not presented like it was when I was growing up. I mean, when I was growing up, we had a radio station. We didn't have the internet because I'm old, but we didn't have the internet to get music from. We didn't have cell phones and all this stuff or readily accessible music. So what we had to do was you had to listen to the radio, and sometimes they played new music. Sometimes they didn't, but there were some stations that played albums or an album side, or they would feature a particular artist, and it was just kind of like a thing of discovery. I kept the radio on a lot more, and then probably around 81, 82, somewhere in there, MTV came out. So yeah, I'm older than MTV for sure. I remember a time without MTV, and now I remember this to me is a time without MTV because MTV used to be about music, and they spawned another station, VH1, and then soon after that, BET came, and there was MTV2, and you know probably if you've been around for a while, the history of kind of video and music on television. But you know what I'm reminded of, since I said that, before all of that, there was America's Top 10 with Casey Kasem, the voice of, I believe, Shaggy from Scooby Doo and probably Scooby Doo as well. Hosted a show, and he had America's Top 10. It was just the top, I guess, top 40 type of hits, but it was only the top 10. And he would introduce a song, tell you a little bit about the artist, kind of leave you with a little mystery, and then ta-da, the music would play, and you would have just some incredible group. Most times, it was someone that had uh, a song out that a lot of people appreciated. I guess because it was the top 10. But now, if you look at the top 10 now, um, I don't know that anyone kind of classifies it as the top 10. You know, a lot of music is in heavy rotation, but it's just not the same. And I try not to be too nostalgic about music that way, because I think with every day there's new artists, there's new music, and if you know where to look and know what to listen to, there's really good music being made now. But it's not pushed and featured as much as um, some of the music now. And honestly, the biggest hole of music for me right now is uh, the hip hop genre, and that's I'm going to save that for another program, because I know if I was well versed in it, that there would be really good music, really good hip hop that I need to listen to right now. But when I turn on the radio, that is not what I'm hearing. I'm not hearing the good stuff. I'm not hearing a lot that I can identify with. It seems like it's all kind of cookie cutter and the same. But I want to kind of go back to uh, not really the birth of rock and roll, because when you think rock and roll, a lot of people think of, I guess they have a certain thing in mind. And what I've learned through listening to a lot of music is that you can't have R&B without the B. You can't have rock and roll without that B. And a lot of jazz still has that initial B, and that B is blues. It's rhythm and blues. That's where rock and roll came from. Jazz was influenced by it. Last week we talked about funk, but I can't imagine funk without the blues. And I want to credit my buddy Alonzo for suggesting that we talk about the blues. And I hope you have a chance to watch this, um, because the blues, to me, is a foundation for so many genres of music. When I discovered the blues, uh, I came up as a kid in the Baptist church. And so when I went to church, the music that I heard was called gospel music. But if you look at the instrumentation and kind of the singing and everything, if you took the lyrical content out of it, what I was listening to was the blues. And I think that's important to recognize. If you go back to and I tried this, I can't find exactly the correlation that I was looking for between like a Mahalia Jackson singing the blues. And if you don't know who Mahalia Jackson is, you need to click on a separate screen and do the Google thing and find out who Mahalia Jackson is, because she was an incredible singer at a time when I would say there was a slim amount of people that appreciated what Mahalia Jackson did, but I think she's widely recognized now as uh, perhaps a voice that's on par with like an Aretha Franklin or another important vocalist that just has so much ability and such an instrument to use. But she sang gospel music. But there is, from listening to a few songs this week, there's a light blues influence, because you really can't get away from the blues. It's not what I grew up with so much. Um, it's almost elevated from what I grew up with. It's something beyond the blues. But so that led me back to listening to Muddy Waters, who is most definitely the blues. And in my mind, Muddy Waters is kind of my originator of the blues. That is my kind of first exposure of what the blues is. But I learned that before Muddy Waters was Robert Johnson, and I listened to Robert Johnson, and it's Robert Johnson very much sounds like the blues that I grew up listening to, thinking that it was actually gospel music. Sounds like Robert Johnson. He has almost, it's not a falsetto that he sings in, but in my mind, it sounds almost like a female voice that he sings in. But his guitar playing, which was critical for the blues, I can't, to me, you can play the blues on a piano, but blues devoid of guitar almost isn't the blues. You could have a harmonica probably solo and still have the blues in my mind. Uh, but at the heart of it, you need guitar. It can be guitar without bass. It could be just guitar all by itself. It could be guitar and harmonica. Um, you can add piano probably. That's probably not my favorite, but guitar and drums and kind of that four-piece set with uh, just a singer, and probably not the best singer. Blues, I would say, is not known for their vocal talent, but it conveys all of the struggle, the pain, and everything that was a personal experience at that time. Looks like I have a viewer. I want to welcome you to the green room here. I appreciate you spending time checking this out. I imagine a lot of people will watch this and rebroadcast or whatever on YouTube, because this is a time where people have other things going on. It's around Christmas time, and there's a big shuffle of stuff that's going on. So I think everybody understands that, and I appreciate you taking time out. But tonight I want to talk about the blues. And so far we've covered Robert Johnson, and we've got Muddy Waters. Other blues names that really stick out in my mind is B.B. King. And I watched a couple of videos this week on B.B. King and what his contribution was to the blues, because it seemed like B.B. King had a very simplistic approach to the blues in my mind. And not that blues should be complicated or anything that um, is thought out and planned and everything like that. But it seemed like when I listened to B.B. King, he never played more than one note at a time. There was no chords and things like that. But I kind of have more of an understanding now that he took those chord structures and melodies and sort of broke everything apart so that it was more expressive for him. And so I feel like I need to revisit a lot of B.B. King and just see what he was doing, because my initial approach on B.B. King, I really didn't understand what he did. In the same token, not to get off subject, but I felt the same way about Miles Davis. My first exposure to Miles Davis uh, probably was his work that I did not appreciate most. I appreciate Miles Davis, and more importantly, many other people that worked with Miles Davis that were, and I'm not completely off topic talking about Miles Davis and jazz fusion. He also did the blues and worked with people like Herbie Hancock and there were other people that their names escape me right now, but other very important people that were influenced by the blues, that used what Robert Johnson and other people like that did to. I'm sorry, I got a message. So Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you for the message. And yeah, I'll just get with you later. But so I guess what I'm trying to say is you had people early on that influenced people that created jazz, probably in the 30s and 40s, and then as time progressed into the 50s and 60s, you had uh, people like Chuck Berry. I listened to recently that there's a heavy blues influence, and I would say that Chuck Berry has a lot in common with B.B. King, in that there wasn't a lot of complicated song structure to Chuck Berry, but it was very effective. He really embodies rock and roll, early rock and roll for me, more so than say a Bill Haley. But I don't think you can separate rock and roll from Bill Haley and Chuck Berry and many other people that kind of played that early rock and roll style. They still used the guitar. They still played blues based uh, music, but there was something that they added that was a little bit different. There was a little less pain. There was a little more joy. It was more upbeat generally, but still, you had the blues. I mean, things weren't going right. The lyrics uh, weren't always happy, you know, in their music. It definitely wasn't like a classical based influence or any of that stuff. It was something completely new at that time. As you fast forward, you get people like, well, the British invasion basically came from uh, people in the United States did not necessarily appreciate and want to record the people that were making the blues initially. The African American black players that played the blues. And over there in England, when they got a taste of that, they really did appreciate that. And they said, "Hey, we not only want to mimic this, but we want to. This stuff should be recorded and distributed. This is really great music." Is what they thought in Britain. So what it seems like, I guess, initially, that you had a lot of English bands that wanted to play the blues and mimic Robert Johnson and a Muddy Waters, a Howling Wolf, and other such players. And because they were white, they were able to bring that to a massive audience. It was much more acceptable coming from them than it was the originator of the blues. So rock and roll took off. You had the British invasion with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, the Who, many other great bands like that. But I would say, the Rolling Stones in particular, in my mind, really were just right there with the blues players, and they were responsible for getting a lot of them recorded and distributed. And so they don't not only took the blues and made rock and roll out of it, but they helped the blues people be appreciated and distributed and recognized for what they do in their emulation of their style and everything. It all kind of went together. So uh, there's a lot that's hard to separate from rock and roll and the blues until probably you get to the 1980s. I would say that in the 70s, you had mainstream rock and roll, you had a hard rock sort of movement, you had uh, a lot of popular music was influenced by the blues, jazz, of course, but I think they were straying and working with new ideas maybe in the 70s that were a little less blues based. Gospel music for sure was still very blues based. Um, there were some other genres that, well, even country and Western music, still very heavily influenced by the blues. When you look at the lyrical content, They sang about sad things. My truck broke down as the kind of the classic line, but I know that's cliche. Uh, I mean, take things like the coal miner's daughter. I mean, the devil went down to Georgia. So many things still had their kind of toe dipped into the blues that it's inseparable. Um, Still really, really, really good music was made. And then as you get to the 1980s, you had kind of the synthesizers came out and technology played a, a role in what music was influenced and everything. But you still had at the core people playing the blues, and you introduced people like Bonnie Raitt was around back then. ZZ Top was very Texas blues based. BB King was definitely around. Um, Gosh, there's so many names, but to give you a few, that's what I was looking to do. In the '90s, for me, you had not only Bonnie Raitt kind of came to prominence. People like Robert Cray were incredible. Let's see who else. Stevie Ray Vaughan. Uh, um, Blues Traveler had a little bit, even though they had blues in their name, they had a little bit of blues influence for me. Might have been a different type of blues than I was used to. I was listening to a lot of Texas and Chicago kind of blues. Those were my favorites. So Stevie Ray Vaughan was huge. It was a guitar virtuoso to me and just an amazing player. And I love his music. I love Bonnie Raitt. Gosh, so many names. In the '90s, it becomes more difficult. 2000s, I think we see a heavy pop, and I mean, we're talking about when sampling and hip hop and everything kind of bloomed at that point. So, kind of the blues based people just kind of started fading away. And when I look at kind of present day right now, uh, Gary Clark Jr. comes to mind. He is kind of like taking the vanguard. He is the tip of the spear right now for blues. Um, I think that John Mayer has a heavy blues influence. The way he does his solos and everything, he's very much for me kind of an adult contemporary to pop, but not really pop. He's more complex than that. Um, so many people, so many people to listen to. Um, I've been enjoying today and rediscovering Alabama Shakes, and there's some blues there. They're blues based, I would say, rock and roll, but that is music that I really can't tell you. I can't pigeonhole that at all. It's just so unique and wonderful that I need to explore that more to even really be able to talk about what they do. Um, Gosh, there's so much. The blues has such a heavy influence on all musical genres, and it's a sound that I really love and have kind of lost touch with. If you listen to the same music too long, you kind of grow a little tired of it, or at least I do. I need a lot of variety of music to listen to, and so I've kind of taken a break. And probably what I've listened to most recently was EDM and or let's see, electronic dance music for people that are uninitiated. Um, Stuff like that was kind of new and different for me. so that's what I was listening to. But right now, doing this program, I've had to listen to a lot of music so that I can be able to talk about things and refresh my memory. And blues really is the basis for everything for me, and it is. I'm listening to it with fresh ears and being a little nostalgic about it. And I hope that you will maybe post a comment below and tell me what artists that I just totally neglected that are your favorites. And you know, by you subscribing, it lets me know that this this little project that I'm working on is worthwhile. And the comments are just another way that we can engage with each other. I mean, I'm really doing this as a personal project, just out of fun. I think that getting together and really discussing music is is therapeutic. It's a good time. It's something that a lot of people identify with, and I hope that you've enjoyed this show. It's a little bit shorter than usual because I can't really have a conversation. It's just me uh, by myself telling you my ideas, and I feed off of your feedback, and I need that to keep going. But hopefully next week we'll have another good topic. We might revisit the blues. Who knows? Because finding other people's opinions uh, triggers my memories of my experiences, and it would be something that I think is pretty interesting to watch. Well, we're going to do this next week about 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. next Thursday. These are always on Thursdays. And if I get rolling with this a little bit more, I might post some things in between each Thursday, little specials. But they likely won't be live. They'll be recorded videos. And so look out for those. And I appreciate your time. I appreciate you watching. And please subscribe, thumbs up if you like this, and comment if you don't, and let me know what you want to see. I'm open to new topics, so post those in the comments, or you're welcome to email me. I think there's probably a link in the description or whatever to get a hold of me via email. But we will see you next week in the green room.